Have you ever wondered why some people seem to always get what they want? Why they navigate chaos with ease while others crumble? The secret isn't intelligence or connections, it's emotional mastery. And nobody understood this better than Machiavelli. Most people think Machiavelli's power came from manipulation. They're wrong. His true genius was his iron grip on his own emotions while reading everyone else's like an open book. Think about it. When was the last time your emotions hijacked your success? That moment of anger that ruined a negotiation, that fear that stopped you from taking a life-changing risk, that impulsive decision you immediately regretted. What if I told you there's a hidden practice that Machiavelli mastered centuries ago that can transform your life today? A method so powerful that once you learn it, you'll never be manipulated, intimidated, or controlled by anyone again. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal the exact techniques that history's most influential power players used to maintain perfect emotional control while strategically influencing everyone around them. These aren't theoretical concepts. They're practical tools you can start using today. Most people spend their lives as emotional puppets, pulled by strings they don't even see. But after watching this video, you'll become the puppet master of your own life, and whether you choose to use it or not, gain significant influence over others. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about freedom, the freedom that comes when you master your emotions instead of letting them master you. Are you ready to discover Machiavelli's hidden practice? Let's begin. Number 1. The 3-breath reset protocol. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful people in history seem unfazed by chaos? While everyone around them loses their composure, they remain calm, collected, and in command. This isn't a coincidence or some innate talent they were born with. It's a skill, one that Machiavelli understood centuries before modern psychology caught up. Think about your own life for a moment. Remember that time when someone pushed your buttons and you reacted instantly, only to regret it minutes later? Or that high-stakes situation where your emotions took over, clouding your judgment when clarity was most crucial? We've all been there. But what separates the masters of influence from everyone else is their ability to create space between stimulus and response. Most people attempt to control their emotions using complex techniques they read in self-help books. The problem? These elaborate methods are impossible to remember in the heat of the moment. It's like trying to recall a complicated recipe while your kitchen is on fire. By the time you remember step 3, everything's already burned to the ground. Machiavelli understood this fundamental truth. Simplicity is power. The most effective emotional regulation technique must be so simple you can deploy it even when your rational mind is under siege by powerful emotions. This brings us to our first powerful technique out of the 5 I'll share with you today, the 3-breath reset protocol. Here's how it works. When you feel a strong emotion rising, whether it's anger during a negotiation, fear before a presentation, or anxiety when facing opposition, you take 3 strategic breaths. For the first breath, inhale for 4 seconds while visualizing your emotion as a specific color. If it's anger, perhaps it's red. Anxiety might be a murky green. Hold that breath for 4 seconds while mentally labeling the emotion without judgment. Simply note, this is anger or this is fear. Then exhale slowly for 6 seconds, visualizing that color dissolving and dispersing from your body. Repeat this process 2 more times, and something remarkable happens. You create immediate psychological distance between yourself and the overwhelming emotion. You haven't suppressed it. Suppression never works long-term. Instead, you've acknowledged it while preventing it from hijacking your brain's executive function. Those crucial seconds are all you need to shift from reactive to responsive. While others remain slaves to their emotional impulses, you'll maintain command of yourself and, by extension, the situation. I challenge you to practice this protocol daily, even for minor irritations. Soon it will become automatic, ready to deploy in moments when emotional mastery matters most. Remember, the person who controls their emotions in a room full of reactivity becomes the most powerful person in that room by default. This 3-breath reset protocol isn't just some relaxation technique. It's the foundation of strategic influence that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. You cannot control others until you first control yourself. Number 2. The mirror technique for emotional intelligence. Do you know that uncomfortable feeling when someone seems to be reading your mind? When they somehow know exactly what you're thinking or feeling before you've said a word? That unsettling sensation is what others will experience around you after you master what I'm about to share. Most people believe they're good at reading others. Studies show that the majority of us rate ourselves above average at detecting emotions and intentions in those around us. But here's the brutal truth. Most of us are terrible at it. We rely on obvious facial expressions, which can be easily manipulated. We fall for practiced smiles and rehearsed sincerity. And in today's world of practiced personas and social media performances, traditional methods of reading people fail spectacularly. This is where most people's power leaks away. They miss the real emotional cues that would give them tremendous advantage in negotiations, relationships, and any social situation. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of understanding others' true motivations. But what most historians miss is how he developed this skill through systematic observation of subtle, physical tells that are nearly impossible to fake, tells that bypass conscious control. This brings us to the second of our 5 techniques, the mirror technique for emotional intelligence. Instead of focusing on easily manipulated facial expressions, this technique trains you to observe 3 specific physiological tells that operate below conscious control: pupil dilation, breathing patterns, and micro-changes in vocal tone. When someone is genuinely interested or engaged, their pupils dilate slightly. When they're anxious or uncomfortable, their breathing pattern shifts, often becoming slightly shallower with occasional small catches. And when they're being deceptive or holding back, their vocal tone often changes in subtle ways, particularly at the end of sentences. Here's how to master this technique. Begin by turning off the sound while watching dramatic scenes in movies or TV shows. Focus exclusively on the actor's pupils, chest movements, and neck tensions. Predict what emotion they're feeling and what they might do next, based solely on these cues. Then replay the scene with sound to check your accuracy. Within just 2 weeks of daily practice, you'll notice your sensitivity to these subtle cues increasing dramatically. Within a month, you'll start picking up on emotional states in real people before they're even consciously aware of them themselves. Once you develop this skill, something remarkable happens in your interactions. You'll notice slight tension in someone's breathing pattern and adjust your approach before they consciously register their own discomfort. You'll catch the pupil dilation that signals genuine interest versus polite attention. You'll hear the micro-change in vocal tone that reveals uncertainty behind confident words. The power this gives you in negotiations, leadership positions, or any human interaction is immense. While others are reacting to words and manufactured expressions, you're responding to the underlying emotional reality. Remember, mastering others begins with perceiving what they cannot hide. When you can read the subtle, involuntary signals that betray true emotional states, you gain a perspective that very few possess, and the advantage it provides cannot be overstated. Practice the mirror technique daily, and within weeks, you'll possess what will seem to others like an almost supernatural ability to know what they're feeling before they fully realize it themselves. Number 3. The reverse trigger mapping exercise. Have you ever wondered why certain situations or people can instantly derail your composure? One moment you're completely in control, and the next you're emotionally hijacked, saying or doing things you later regret. This vulnerability to emotional triggers is perhaps the greatest weakness exploited by those seeking to manipulate you. Most people go through life completely unaware of their emotional trigger patterns. They're ambushed by the same reactions over and over, never understanding why they lose control in specific situations. While they might recognize what triggered them after the fact, they fail to identify the deeper patterns connecting these triggers. This ignorance makes them predictable and, therefore, controllable by others who recognize these patterns. Machiavelli understood a fundamental truth that modern psychology has only recently confirmed. Those who understand your emotional triggers can predict and direct your behavior with alarming precision. Your unexamined emotional reactions are like puppet strings others can pull to make you dance to their tune. This brings us to the third of our 5 techniques, the reverse trigger mapping exercise. Unlike conventional approaches that simply identify external triggers, this technique works backward from your emotional reactions to uncover the hidden internal associations creating these responses. It reveals the psychological blueprint of your vulnerabilities that others might exploit, often unconsciously. Here's how to implement this powerful technique. Create a private trigger journal dedicated solely to documenting situations that provoke strong emotional responses in you. But instead of simply recording what happened, follow these specific steps. First, describe the emotional reaction in detail, not just, "I felt angry," but the physical sensations, thoughts, and impulses that accompanied that anger. Second, identify the specific moment when the emotion took hold. What exactly was said or done in that precise instant? Third, and most crucially, ask yourself, what deeper meaning did I assign to this trigger? What story am I telling myself about what this means about me, others, or the world? This third step is where the transformative power lies. You'll begin noticing patterns most people never recognize in themselves. Perhaps diverse situations all trigger the same emotion, because, underneath, they all connect to a core belief about rejection, inadequacy, or control. Once you've mapped these patterns over several weeks, you can systematically desensitize yourself through targeted mental rehearsal. Visualize the triggering scenarios while practicing the 3-breath reset protocol we discussed earlier. This combination creates new neural pathways, gradually reducing the automatic emotional response. What makes this technique so powerful is that it transforms unconscious vulnerabilities into conscious choices. Situations that once instantly provoked you now become moments of clarity where you maintain complete emotional sovereignty. I've seen people completely transform their professional and personal lives using this technique. Negotiations that once left them emotionally drained now energize them. Confrontations that once derailed them now become opportunities for influence. Remember, those who can map their own emotional triggers become virtually immune to manipulation. When you understand the internal associations creating your reactions, you remove the invisible strings others might pull to control you. And in doing so, you take a giant step toward Machiavelli's ideal, becoming the master of your emotions and, by extension, mastering everyone else. Number 4, the strategic vulnerability principle. Have you ever noticed how some of the most influential people occasionally share personal struggles or weaknesses? It seems counterintuitive, right? We're taught that power comes from appearing invulnerable, yet history's greatest leaders have strategically revealed certain vulnerabilities while carefully guarding others. Most people fall into one of 2 self-defeating extremes. Either they build impenetrable walls, hiding all weaknesses and creating distance that prevents genuine influence, or they overshare indiscriminately, undermining their authority and giving others ammunition to use against them. Both approaches severely limit their ability to lead and influence. Machiavelli understood something profound that modern psychology has only recently begun to articulate. Complete invulnerability is not only impossible but actively counterproductive to lasting influence. The appearance of total strength paradoxically makes you seem less human, less relatable, and ultimately less influential. This brings us to the fourth of our 5 techniques, the strategic vulnerability principle. Contrary to conventional wisdom, calculated vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools for emotional control and influence. By selectively revealing certain vulnerabilities while maintaining complete control over others, you create what psychologists call a pressure release valve that prevents emotional tension from building to unmanageable levels. Here's how to implement this principle effectively. First, categorize your vulnerabilities into 3 tiers. Tier 1 includes universal human experiences everyone can relate to. Occasional self-doubt, specific learning challenges, or past failures you've clearly overcome. Tier 2 includes personal challenges that humanize you without compromising your core strengths. Tier 3 contains your fundamental vulnerabilities that must remain protected. The strategic sharing of Tier 1 and selected Tier 2 vulnerabilities accomplishes something remarkable. It creates psychological safety for others while simultaneously building trust and rapport. People instinctively trust those who have the confidence to acknowledge certain weaknesses. This sense of authenticity makes others more receptive to your influence. Consider how this works in practice. When a leader acknowledges initially struggling with public speaking before mastering it, team members feel more comfortable sharing their own challenges. When a negotiator admits to not being an expert in a tangential area while demonstrating mastery in the core domain, it builds credibility rather than diminishing it. The key lies in the selective nature of this vulnerability. You're not exposing your Achilles heel, you're strategically revealing relatable human experiences that create connection without compromising your position. This principle works because it leverages a psychological phenomenon called the pratfall effect, where competent people become more likable and influential after revealing minor imperfections. It transforms the perception of you from an untouchable authority figure to a relatable yet highly competent leader. I've seen executives transform toxic work environments by strategically applying this principle. Teams that once hoarded information for fear of appearing weak began collaborating openly. Leaders who seemed unapproachable became magnets for loyalty and commitment. Remember, complete emotional control doesn't mean becoming a robot. It means strategically channeling emotional expression for maximum effect. The person who never shows vulnerability doesn't appear strong. They appear inauthentic or insecure. By mastering the strategic vulnerability principle, you create a powerful paradox. The selective revealing of certain vulnerabilities actually strengthens your position and expands your influence. You control the narrative around your own limitations rather than letting others define them for you. Practice this principle consciously, and you'll discover what Machiavelli knew centuries ago. True power comes not from appearing flawless, but from strategically managing how others perceive both your strengths and your vulnerabilities. Number 5. The emotional leverage framework. Have you ever wondered why some people can walk into a room and immediately gain cooperation while others struggle despite saying all the right things? Or why certain leaders inspire fierce loyalty while others, equally qualified, face constant resistance? The difference often comes down to an invisible skill that's rarely discussed but immensely powerful. Most people approach influence through logic or authority. They present rational arguments or rely on position power to get what they want. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Human beings are not primarily logical creatures. We make decisions based on emotion and then justify them with logic afterward. This is why perfectly reasonable proposals often fail, while emotionally resonant ones succeed. Machiavelli recognized this fundamental aspect of human nature centuries before modern neuroscience confirmed it. He understood that to truly influence others, you must first understand what drives them at an emotional level, what I call their emotional anchors. This brings us to the fifth and most advanced of our techniques, the emotional leverage framework. Unlike manipulation, which attempts to exploit weaknesses, this framework focuses on identifying and aligning with others' core values and emotional needs. It's about creating resonance rather than resistance, influence rather than coercion. Here's how to master this framework. Begin by observing the language patterns people use when discussing what matters to them. Listen for repeated themes and emotional intensity. Some people are primarily driven by security and stability. Others value freedom and autonomy above all else. Still others are motivated by recognition and achievement. Once you've identified someone's emotional anchors, the next step is critical. Rather than trying to change their priorities to match yours, adjust your communication to align with their existing values. Frame your ideas and proposals in terms that resonate with what already matters to them. For example, if you're proposing a new initiative to someone anchored in security, emphasize how it reduces risk and creates stability. For someone anchored in achievement, highlight how it creates opportunity for recognition and advancement. Same proposal, entirely different framing. What makes this framework so powerful is that it creates what psychologists call cognitive ease, a sense that your ideas naturally fit with their existing worldview. This generates receptivity without resistance. I've seen negotiators transform seemingly deadlocked situations by simply reframing proposals to align with the other party's emotional anchors. I've watched leaders dramatically increase team performance by communicating the same goals through different value frameworks for different team members. To implement this framework effectively, create what I call an emotional anchor map for important people in your professional and personal life. Document the values they reference most frequently, the emotional triggers that energize or deflate them, and the language patterns that indicate what matters most to them. With practice, you'll develop an almost intuitive sense for other people's emotional drivers, allowing you to communicate in ways that naturally resonate rather than create resistance. The true power of this framework lies in its ethical application. You're not manipulating people against their interests. You're creating alignment between your goals and their existing values. This generates a form of influence that others welcome rather than resist, influence that builds relationships rather than depleting them. Master the emotional leverage framework, and you'll possess what Machiavelli considered the ultimate form of power, the ability to make others want what you want, not because you forced them, but because you made it compelling within their existing value system. You've now discovered Machiavelli's hidden practice, the 5 techniques that transform ordinary influence into extraordinary power through emotional mastery. From the 3-breath reset protocol that gives you control in heated moments, to the mirror technique that reveals what others try to hide, to the reverse trigger mapping that makes you immune to manipulation, to the strategic vulnerability principle that builds authentic connection, and finally to the emotional leverage framework that creates willing alignment. These tools comprise a complete system for emotional sovereignty. Remember, emotional mastery isn't about suppressing your feelings or manipulating others. It's about freedom. Freedom from reactive patterns that undermine your goals, freedom from others' attempts to control you, and freedom to create the impact you truly desire. Begin implementing these techniques today, and you'll experience what Machiavelli knew centuries ago. When you master your emotions, you truly do master everyone else, not through coercion, but through genuine understanding and strategic influence. The choice of how to use this power remains, as always, entirely yours.